Hello and welcome to the International Schools Podcast. My name is Dan Taylor.
My name is John Micton. Join us twice a month at the International Schools Podcast as we have conversations with international school leaders, educators, and entrepreneurs working and engaging in the world of international schools and education.
And finally, just to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, ASA for Education, for making this podcast happen. Now on to the episode.
Welcome to the International Schools Podcast. Really good to be back. And Dan, so nice to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, John. Important to say you've actually had COVID very sadly, and you actually have COVID now, which so you're making a Herculean effort to record, but look like you're feeling a bit better.
I'm actually fine. I'm much better, triple vaccinated, all those good things. And it's just, but I wouldn't want to miss this for the world.
Definitely. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, so we have our guest, Andrew Hoover, who's the head of school at the American International School of Chennai. I've had the privilege of knowing Andrew for quite a few years. We actually worked together at the American School in Japan. We were both in the middle school. I was the tech integrator and Andrew was a social studies teacher. So over the years, we've shared a lot of stories, and I've always been so impressed with Andrew's leadership and his approach and disposition to leadership in schools. And he's finishing 11 years at the American International School of Chennai in India, which is in Southeast India. And so we're really looking forward to talking about that. But I know Dan always does such a nice job of asking some travel questions. And just so over to you, Dan, more for the kind of lifestyle questions that I think are so important.
I just enjoy living in different places. So I've never lived in India. I've been to India not for a while, and I'm very much looking forward to going back once quarantine's ended. But you were in Mumbai and then Chennai, is that right, Andrew?
That's correct.
And how was it? So you've been there since 2005. Like how was Mumbai? How was Chennai? Like and how much has it changed since you've been there?
Yeah, well, before I talk about that, one of my favorite subjects, in fact, if you've been someplace for 16, 17 years, it better be one of your favorite subjects, right? But I want to just extend my gratitude for the invitation to be here with both of you today. This is, I'm a podcast consumer like few others. I walk a lot and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to yours. Yeah. I really appreciate everything you two bring to the podcast universe, and particularly to our areas of passion and professionalism. So I want to thank you both for that. And John, special shout out to you for being here talking to me on a day that you have COVID. So that's extraordinary. I'm really dreading I'm dreading the variant that will go into our computers and travel that way. That'll really
cripple we're good.
us. Yeah. So Dan, great question. I've been fortunate in being in India and being an administrator here and recruiting people for here, because I am someone who, when I visited Bombay from Japan back in 2004, I fell in love with Bombay. And when I moved here, it took me 3 weeks to just feel completely at home. And John and I crossed paths in Japan, and I swear it took me 3 years to feel at home in Japan. So India is a place where I have this sort of, what do you call it, an innate affinity. And, sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. Yeah. I won't fall into the trap that many people here try to get me to do, which is, hey, Andrew, what city do you like more, Bombay or Chennai? They're contrasting places. And that's one of the things that's amazing about living in India, is just what a region, which is, the country is huge. It's a region of contrasts. And it's one of the things that I have found particularly stimulating about it. And it's one of the things I think that has kept me here, because, any place you're going to stay for a long time, there's got to be some fuel there to keep it new and to keep it interesting. And I found this about Japan. I was in Japan for 11 years. There was just always, it constantly surprised you. And this culture has got deep roots, and it's also highly dynamic. I mean, John's visited India fairly recently. He's come here to the school. Chennai, this city cooks, it's up early and things are happening and things are changing. And you've got that just amazing modern contrast with this amazing historical culture that's got stories and traditions and connections. So, it's been one of those places. Obviously, at the most interesting level, Bombay is a super city and a mega city. And we moved there from Tokyo, probably the world's largest, most organized city, to Bombay, which is organized wouldn't be the adjective you use to describe it. Fascinating place, just big and really kind of constantly at you and intense. And Chennai is a large Indian city, 10, 12 million, nestled along the coast of Southeast India, very suburban in its sprawl, but very Indian culturally, Tamil. Again, fascinating places. I have loved being here.
It's interesting. I think India, like for someone coming from the West, it's quite polarizing. I think when I went there first of all in '93. We're backpacking all around the world. I spent like a month there, and there was 4 of us, and 2 of us were just like fell in love with it, and then 2 just couldn't get out quick enough. They were just it wasn't for them.
Yeah.
I think you've got to either embrace the how different it is, or it just doesn't work for you.
That's
Well,
interesting,
I mean, it contrasted distinctly with Japan, which I think is one of the reasons that I liked it. I mean, whenever you're going to leave someplace, you want to go someplace that's different.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get me wrong. I loved Japan and I still do. But, when you're going somewhere else, you want someplace that's a little different. And India, culturally, this is a place that'll hug you,
Yeah.
So if you're up for the hug, it's going to hug you back. And you've got to, it's very open because of its long history of incorporating cultures and incorporating people as they've come through this area. It's very much of a welcoming culture. It's a place traveling here, Dan, as you know, it's fantastic. Everywhere you go, you feel like you can get into it. And you don't feel the straight arm. And so being here for this many years has meant that, myself, our kids both, we have 2 kids. They went to ASB in Bombay and they went here. Great travel experiences that they had, and wonderful cultural experiences.
And obviously in the time you've been there, I guess 20 years or no, 15 years, I guess you've been in India. Like you've obviously seen a lot of educators and teachers come and go. Like what advice would you think? I mean, there's probably some people listening to this thinking about working in India. Like, I mean, how have you seen most people really like it, or any advice you'd give? Like any thoughts about people, thinking of working in India as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the pieces that so first of all, when you recruit for here, you bump into, the example which is you gave. Some people have been here and they love it and they know they want to come back, and it's like, recruiting into that cohort of international educators is glorious, right? Because they get it, they've caught the Indian bug and they want to be here. For folks who may not have thought about it, I think one of the things that I lead with, which I think is actually kind of a helpful filter if you're thinking about going into international, which is that India is a place that is not place neutral. India is a place that is going to remind you that you are in India every single day. Yeah. And and when you internalize that just a little bit, you have to reflect on your own relationship to culture and to cultural experiences. I think when I go a little further with that, what does it mean? It means that there are going to be times where it's really tiring. It's going to be times where, you're going to have to become aware of your own cultural aspects of your own cultural kind of background and baggage, and spend time thinking about those. When the place that you go to is culturally neutral or very similar to where you've been, you don't have to go into that space. And so this space, reflective spaces, if we learn nothing else from the pandemic, reflective spaces are tiring. And, this place coming here, you're gonna have to spend some time thinking about yourself as a cultural agent, because this place is going to remind you that, culture is here and it's going to sit on your lap and you're going to have to manage it.
Fantastic.
I think that's so important, even in the fact when you are recruiting, Andrew, I assume most heads, there are cultural nuances to any place you go. And I think even coming to Japan or when we lived in Tanzania, I know we had a lot of talks about what does it feel like coming to a country where often power and electricity are not available. There's the medical might not be to the standards that you expect. And I think it's so important that you internalize that as a candidate and understand what is your cultural compass and how might you deal with it. And if you've never done it, then you just need to be, I think, almost ready for some ups and downs, and some of them quite challenging. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, you're going to have to trade blinders, because, wherever you live, if you don't have blinders on, you're not going to be happy day in and day out, no matter where. Now when I go back to the United States, I got to put the media blinders or I'm going to get driven crazy on, So you do have to have it. We're talking about the same thing in a sense, like it's a level of self-awareness that, again, I love being international because I like the personal work that it inspires me to do, that it makes me do. And sometimes that can be really challenging, but recognizing where you live. So I tell people openly, if they ask, that one of my issues here is ground pollution. And if I let it get to me, if I spend a lot of time thinking about it and looking at it and talking about it all the time, I would have left India 14 years ago. And you have those, they're not, I don't want to belittle these by saying they're pet peeves. They're truly, they're issues that become personal for us. And then how do you manage them? And learning how to do that really is one of the aspects of people who have lived all over the world and who can talk about themselves, I think, as being internationally minded and really understanding what that means at the level of, my feet are on the ground and I love being international.
Definitely. And then, Andrew, my most important travel question as an Englishman is, have you learned to appreciate cricket yet?
So first of all, I attended the India World Cup. The World Cup was here, and my daughter and I went, and of course, when I went to see it live, I learned it. Right, I didn't really understand football, what the world calls football, until I went to matches in Japan, and then I was like, okay, I can appreciate this. Cricket was the same way. So now when I can flip it on and watch, like most sports, I don't have a great appreciation for them on television. So it's one of those things. But of course, I love reading about sports, and cricket's one of those sports that
it's now like religion in India, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. No, I was saying it's like religion, completely off topic, but I read recently that the IPL, which is the Indian Premier League Cricket League, is the second highest paying sports league in the world out of any sport, any country. The NBA is number 1 and the IPL is number 2. So it's big business.
Even more than Premiership.
It's ahead of Major League Baseball. It's ahead of a Premiership in England.
Wow.
It's ahead of all the US sports, ahead of NFL. It's huge.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, John, back to you.
We love our cricket here.
And it is, as we're talking about transitions, we lived in Tanzania and China and Japan. Our most difficult transition was moving to the Czech Republic, coming back to Europe after being away for 16, 17 years, which we did not anticipate. We came in thinking, it's Europe. I'm originally from Switzerland, had lived in Europe, educated in Europe. But it was interesting. So I think, as you said, Andrew, you can never really anticipate what might and what kind of blinders you have. So I thought that is so important, the way you both shared that out.
John, did you find that when you came back to Europe, it was a bit like you missed the sort of how eclectic and how interesting everything was? I know a lot of people move back to Europe from Asia and they really want to go straight back to Asia.
It was so quiet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
being in Tokyo and Beijing and in Dar es Salaam, even Dar es Salaam, that's not a college. There's just, you know, activity, like Andrew says, once the morning starts. And actually in Tokyo, there is no morning or night. It's just constant. And Beijing's a bit like that. And Prague has its, you know, activities, but it just did not feel as vibrant
Interesting.
initially because I was looking through a different lens. And it has a lot of vibrancy, don't get me wrong. But I think that was just a transition. Talking about transitions, Andrew, you're at the kind of at the swan song. You're ending your tenure, 11 years at the school as head of school, and I know you were also a middle school principal in Mumbai and have been very active in leadership in international schools, also with different organizations. And one of the things that, you know, I think is always interesting when we have guests that are not finishing, but transitioning to a new phase of their career, not retiring, but looking at new opportunities, kind of what are some of the things that you're walking away with today that maybe you weren't walking away when you first started? What are some of the things that you now have in your toolkit that maybe you see as opportunities to use in this new context that you're going to explore?
Wow. There's a lot there in that question I could unpack, John.
I know you quite well, Andrew, so we're happy to do a 5-hour podcast.
John's good at these questions, which encompass a lot. I like them. You know, it gives you a lot of freedom to choose which part to ask as well. Though.
Yeah, and especially at this time where, you know, we're coming through these, you know, we're now month 23, managing ourselves and our schools, our peers, our colleagues through, you know, the extraordinary phases of the pandemic, which, you know, also have, you know, just opened up amazing avenues for individual and community sort of reflection and recognition and realization. Aside, John, I think one of the things I've been a teacher for about as long as I've been in a formal leadership role. So I'm a little bit of an unusual head of school. I turned 60 this year. I taught for 16 years. I was, full-time teacher. I didn't, in many respects, I sort of became an accidentally fell into formal leadership roles, but not so accidentally too, because I think as a teacher, I was really drawn to work that was beyond my specific domain, if you'll pardon that limited notion of the classroom. So I got really interested in kind of broader school change and just interested in that work, in the work that I got to do with colleagues, as a team member or team leader, and the change work that one does in a division and even at the school level. So I got kind of drawn into that. I think one of the reasons I got drawn into that is because I have a streak that maybe many educators have, which is that streak of idealism. That we're drawn to we're drawn to this profession and to schools because the possibility of being a part of something that's going to make a difference for the future, that's going to be different tomorrow, is so powerful, right? So I'm also so when I moved into formal leadership role, I think I brought that kind of idealism with me. So if to your question, without going into all the layers of it, I think, I'm coming through 16 years in India and ASB and Bombay, really having recommitted and experienced in so many amazing ways what it means to be an idealistic educator at a leadership level. And I think it has come through for me in the work that I've been able to do in these two mission-driven schools. And what does it mean? John, you know this, I take missions really seriously, not seriously in a pedantic sense, but seriously in terms of those should be our true north. And when they are, that's going to open up lots of conversation, lots of constructive dialogue and some conflict. and I find that space to be exactly where we want to be as schools. I am no less hopeful. I'm no less optimistic than I was, when I was 26 and I took my first teaching job. I've been accused of lacking patience sometimes, and I think some of my impatience is exactly the thing that somebody in my role needs. And that said, I'm still waiting out the inevitable and gradual transformation of our schools and the way that we think about how we prepare kids for strange and complicated and uncertain futures.
And that's interesting. The idealism is, that's something that I think a lot of great leaders really, that's compass that you refer to, that kind of north that you work with that really drives you day to day out. But the challenge very likely is when you are a school leader, you have maybe 100, 200, or even somebody like Dan that has an organization and they have their mission. How do you make sure everybody is as idealistic, or maybe they don't need to be idealistic, but you need them to kind of buy into the thing? And, I have this wonderful relationship with a friend of mine who works at Apple. And every year when I go to Santa Cruz to visit my wife's family, we have this lunch that we've had for years, and I get to spend time at Apple. And the one thing that I always, when I walk out, is like, everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. There is just this overt common belief in what they're doing. And it's not obnoxious or postered around the room, but when you interact with people, they're all focused on the same thing. And I'm wondering, as a leader, how have you kind of gotten your teams to believe in this idealism, or maybe not believe in it, but coalesce around it so there is a unified move?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Starts with oneself, right? What's my relationship to those big ideas? Where am I? And then, what am I going to do about it? Look, you can have the thing, mission statements need to be frameworks for action, right? They should invite us to be doing things. And I think leaders that don't do into their mission, that don't act into their mission, I'd love to have that conversation with leaders who don't think that that's a necessary thing about what we do. From my point of view, it's very necessary. So you're gonna start with yourself. The other thing is, I do think our international schools, I think the missions have a certain resonance when you look across, particularly schools that are, I would say, oriented in a progressive way, have progressive ideas and ideals and progressive values. There is a certain commonality to the things that we want to. The things that we want to do, the way we think about school. But I honestly do think every mission is different, and I don't think they're not all created equal, and I don't think they're all of equal substance. And I think that the substance is in the invitation that missions give to community members to have constructive conversations. If you've got a mission statement that's so, and I don't have one off the top of my head, but that's so simple or so utterly clear that that there's nothing to really talk about or disagree about, I'm wondering, what are you doing? If you think about True North is a large swath of territory. So when I think about our mission and you put it out there and say, that's our True North, well, there's a lot of room for everybody. And I think good missions invite people in to conversations about, fundamentally, what do they mean? What does this word mean? What does it look like when we do this? What's it going to feel like? What's my role in this? Our missions all talk about students, but right behind that are the implications for the adults and the community members as people who are going to, the students kids are always watching and they're always listening. And it's like, what relationship do these set of ideas have to me? So I think great missions invite the conversation, and they also invite conflict. Good core beliefs and core values should invite constructive conflict, and we should be able to have discussions where we disagree about how to do things while we all recognize, all right, this is the direction that we're going. I think when you like, it worries me a little bit when I get the sense that people buy into the mission too easily. Like that as much as I'm sort of not pleasantly surprised by people who come here and don't want to have anything to do with the mission. It's like, we wear it on our sleeves. Why wouldn't you want to at least participate in the figuring out of it?
I'm interested.
Does that answer your question?
Sorry, yeah, I'm interested about like how does it work? Let's say, obviously, you take over the role as a school director or principal or head, depending on the school, and obviously, typically, you're inheriting someone else's mission and someone else's mission statement. And do you think you generally want to change that and adapt it for you and put your stamp on it as a leader? Or would you only take a job at a school where you already agreed with the school's mission? Like, how does that work? If you put yourself in the shoes of someone becoming a leader,
Sure.
like, what should they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've, it depends. I think it depends on sort of what a school's or organization's relationship is with its mission, Dan, right? I mean, because that's going to tell you something about the culture of the school.
Yeah.
So I think going into a place with a mission, if it doesn't resonate, somebody like me who's idealistic, I'm not going to be drawn in, unless the charge is, hey, Andrew, can you come in and turn this thing around? And I didn't have that. I haven't had that experience where that was the sort of the course that we were taking. But I think, first of all, I'll revert back to what I was saying, Dan. I think missions should not be an exclusive set of ideas. I think if it's too tight, if it's too certain, if it's too not ambiguous enough, I think you're going to struggle to have people kind of get inside it and be a participant.
Yeah.
And I also think we have to be careful about here we've had this mission. We didn't have a mission and we didn't have a plan. So when I came here, it was part of the work of the first 2 years. So I definitely got to live it. But I wrote the mission. Our community wrote the mission. There were 30 people in the room, and all 30 people had to agree with it. And part of what you have to acknowledge about leadership is, I think, healthy and good leadership is not about getting what you want. And I wouldn't say that this is my mission. In fact, between the three of us, that's my sense of humor. I really wanted the notion of pursuit of happiness in our mission. And I kind of went out on a limb in those meetings where we were really hashing it out. And the community group just shot me down. And it's like, okay, I'm moving on. I never got, since then, or probably even before that, I've been a bit of a student of happiness. I think happiness is a really important topic for schools to be understanding and learning about. What does it mean? But nonetheless, you don't see it in our mission. And so from a leadership point of view, one lesson that you learn early on in a formal role is it's not about actually in leadership, if you're not compromising, you're probably not leading well.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, this idea.
Yeah, one other thing, Andrew, you mentioned earlier, which I find is really interesting, is like, that you should question the mission. It shouldn't be something that you just have to accept. And honestly, I think a lot of schools get that wrong. I work with a lot of schools. Like, for example, I work with some Christian schools, and their mission is, Christ follows this. And, I'm a Christian, so for me, I agree with this mission. But does every child automatically always, I don't think, I think the mission should be, the children should be told, this is something, you got to question this as well. Like I think you mentioned, it's not always just, you have to accept every aspect of this as the truth laid down from above,
Yeah, I mean, it's in a sense, it is a promise, and it's not, if it's not a reality, and if it's true north, it should be somewhat abstract.
Yeah.
And so there should be lots of room for really good conversation. So, to that, Dan, I often refer to our mission as the primary container for conflict, constructive conflict.
Yeah.
It's also the primary container for alignment. It's also the first document that I'm going to make sure that I've got in my head when I'm making a big decision.
Sure.
It's not a simplistic thing. And again, I like the true north as a notion, as a conceptual notion for the mission, because that's a lot of geography. In the notion of a true north, if I'm standing here in southern India and I point myself true north, there's a lot of territory there for the community to engage with.
Yeah.
And what's important that you keep bringing back, Andrew, is this idea of there needs to be a good discourse, and there needs to be conflict, but constructive conflict. And I think that's something that, especially in this day and age with polarization, and we don't even need to go down that road, we all see it on our feeds and whatever. But I'm wondering, as a school leader, that how do you grapple with this tension of wanting people to be engaged in some type of discourse, call it a conflict discourse, but at the same time make sure it's with empathy, there's some humility, and it's constructive? Because often in schools, you have quite a wide spectrum of buy-ins, and people get tired or they get cynical, et cetera, et cetera. How do you kind of, as a school leader, ensure there is kind of a bottom line that everybody plays by?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, John, and I think that the question itself is an important one to keep on the table. Let me frame it a different way. How do we talk together, and how do we work together? And we know the quality of conversations and the ways that we have those conversations are going to be a direct reflection on the quality of work that gets done and the quality of the organization that quality of the community. And when I say quality, again, I don't mean that, I don't think quality is everyone, sitting around in circles singing the same song and doing everything the same way all the time. But it is about fundamentally, let's go to some basics. I'm a big Democrat with a small d. I believe in democratic processes. I believe in self-determination and equity. And so when you think of that and you apply it, and I think that fits with a progressive school model, what do we believe in? We believe in respecting each other. We believe that we believe in each person's value as a human being. We acknowledge that each one of us has to determine for ourselves the kind of, life of integrity that we're going to lead. We see diversity and we embrace diversity because we know that diversity in all forms, including ways of seeing the world and ways of talking about or thinking about the mission, is going to make us stronger. It doesn't mean that it doesn't always feel great necessarily in the now. But I think, this is the way, this is the way that healthy families, healthy communities, healthy organizations function, right? Conflict is endemic to our work together, as is consensus, as is appreciation and gratitude and love. So I think those things need to go together. When you have the problem where, the core values don't make sense to someone, I think, that's where you have to have hard conversations. And that's where, leaders become, really important to the community. And how do you handle that?
Do you find in your tenure you've had to always come back to those conversations, because you have transitions, you have teachers that leave, new administrators come in, so there's kind of a turnstile. So is this, as a leader, would you say you never need to underestimate how many times you need to remind people of that?
Yeah, I think even in highly stable organizations, and we've gotten a lot better at retaining faculty, but we're an international school, an international student body, international faculty, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of what we think of as churn. And so, yes, how do you, in a sense, reproduce the culture and do that with energy and newness? And I think the great thing about communities that do shift and do new people come in is they bring those perspectives. I think you do, and what I think of as even in organizations or in my family where I don't have a lot of turnover in my family, but the echo is really important. What are the things that kind of get echoed, and they get echoed so you hear them differently in time, but also they reverberate through time into the future. And you've got to find space for those. So I'm going to give you an example that has been really helpful to us. So long ago, we became an adaptive school. So we brought in the adaptive schools collaboration model, and we are still just super committed to that. And that, so that's one of those professional kind of learning events that wasn't eventful. Instead, it has become part of the DNA of the school. And what that has empowered us to do is have hard conversations. It's helped us understand how to be collaborators, and collaborators aren't necessarily agreeers. Collaborators are people who kind of go into teamwork situations and mix it up and really work through stuff to do the best work that we can. I think that's filtered down to kids as well. How do we work together? I mean, if you think about what democracies are, it's so central. So, I actually, take an example. I look at the adaptive schools work that we do, and I link it directly to the mission, even though it's very much on the ground. And actually, I link it to my broader passion for creating democratic institutions. So I think that answers your question, but I think you gotta keep your eyes on the ball. And I think you do have to look at every time you change a group, every time a new person comes in or person leaves, you've changed the group and you've changed the culture. So you have to acknowledge that. And so you've got to become a good storyteller, and you've got to become really be clear about what our commitments are that we're gonna get the most from as we continue on this journey toward what our mission, something up there that's true north.
And what's interesting, as you describe that kind of reiteration that occurs, and with people coming in and out, and always making sure, and you use the adaptive schools, what I think so often, and you alluded to this, kids listen and watch and see what's going in the school building much more than often we realize. And often staff will, share something in the corridor or in an open coffee room, and it trickles out. And I think we underestimate how quickly kids pick up on that and on the culture. And I think if they see that you're describing, this reiteration, good conflict, collaboration doesn't mean we all agree, but we're coming to consensus. I think that has a huge impact on them as that echo chamber that you use so nicely is that, what echo chambers are we creating when those kids are in the corridor and they start seeing us or hear about a meeting. And many of the kids, like our children, they sat at the table and they heard us talk about school, and neither of my kids are going into school. There you go. So I think, that's so important. Andrew, as I'm listening to you and your dedication and your passion, and I know the work that you've put in to the schools that you've worked in, of course, you're constantly being pulled at by a million different people. You have a board, you have your directors, you've got your teachers, you've got the parents, and you've got the cultural context, maybe it be local officials or whatever. And, we're all human. And what have you found in your 11 years is kind of just your well-being and just managing this constant being on? And if you're passionate, you give everything. How do you recharge? What are some things maybe that you would want to share on reflection with other leaders or even teachers or people that are very busy, kind of what have you learned in this journey? What is the story that might have changed with well-being?
Well, that's a great question, and there are a lot of a lot of my colleagues here at this school, here now, and who have been here, who would do a much better job of answering that question than I would. As your preamble to the question kind of indicates, I think my challenge personally has been, really finding balance with the time demands of the job and the time demands of being a parent and being a spouse, and then the time demands that you really do need to give to yourself, right? And I'd say, generally my challenge has been I've struggled. I've been challenged to give to myself in the ways that I think really we need to be conveying. So as the kids have listened and watched me, I'd say that's one area where I would have liked to have said to them, yeah, don't do this part, one of the most important conversations that we started having as part of our planning process that's linked to our mission has been about well-being. And that's those conversations became really important to us when the pandemic hit. Like they were really important to us before, but one thing that the pandemic has done, in my view, is it's put us all sort of in that vulnerable space that really kids are at all the time. Kids don't know the future. They're still their brains are not hardwired to kind of suss out certainty and pathways and that kind of thing. And we've been living that way, and we talk about these missions. And all of a sudden, this pandemic has put us all on the ledge, right? All of a sudden, so in any case, we have this well-being framework that's been incredibly helpful to us to have conversations and to get good work done. And one pillar of it is self-awareness. And I think if I've learned anything over the last few years in the pandemic, it is that, becoming much more self-aware to the stories in my head about where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And then how does that relate to me? So I think if I could answer the question, it's almost the answer. You really do have to think of yourself as a stakeholder. And that's been a challenge for me. And through the pandemic, I've actually learned how to think of myself that way and practice that more intentionally. But the notion that you are a stakeholder of your own life, that, yeah, you have to judge. Yep, I'm accountable to lots of people. I'm also accountable to myself. Wow, it's like I wish that I had thought of that when I was 12. It's not not a lot of wisdom there, but it took a pandemic for me to really recognize and to take that seriously.
Yeah, I think all of us, for some reason, well-being was, and we've had guests here talk about well-being. We've all understood it, but somehow the pandemic really brought it out. And I think, for many leaders, and that's something that, I'm curious to hear from you, Andrew, for many school leaders around the world, it's gotten more and more complicated. If you're a school leader, you're not just doing education, you're doing personality conflicts, you're doing political conflicts, you're doing environmental conflicts. There's so many things that come to your table. And very likely you can go and get a doctorate and a master's in that field, but the complexity, the nuances, and the constant uncertainty and constant demands, what would you say to aspiring leaders, the people that are maybe starting to become an assistant principal and they want to, become a school head? What are some cautions, or what are some things that you think looking back, because it's really changed since when I think of in my own school, the headmaster, headmistress had a very parochial kind of limited role, and there wasn't much on the table. I'm not undermining or saying that their job wasn't important, but I think the world has become so much more polarized. There's so many more complexities. What do you think are some guideposts that you would say, okay, you're interested in going into leadership, let me warn you, or let me make sure you understand this?
John, you lob these onions at me.
Sorry.
And I just want to grab them and peel them back. I think so. A couple things. First, with leadership, I've alluded to this. I think when you're a leader, I think you've got to become a student of yourself and of leadership. Don't underestimate when sometimes as educators we think, oh, well, I'm really good at curriculum instruction, or I like being with adults. Yeah. And there's an entire field of literature and thinking and processing out there and it's about leadership. It's complicated. And so a piece of advice there would be, get serious about being a student of yourself and about the area of leadership. But, someone aspiring to do that, I think, I've got a 25-year-old, John, like you, our kids are very similar in age, and a 23-year-old, my conversation, what do you care about? What are you passionate about? And so, in education, if you want to go into leadership, it better be something that you care about. There needs to be something there that you care about and that you're passionate about. And if you've got if those fires are burning, then go and just, remember you're going to have to know yourself differently than you probably have in the past. And there is this complexity of roles that, leadership fundamentally is a small L process. You certainly in flat organizations like schools, you don't lead with the title. You've got you got a lot. There's a lot to do. So I think I'd be there. John, that I talk to. I think middle level leadership in schools, like team leadership, some of the hardest leadership work there is in the world. It's not necessarily the most risky, but team leader roles in schools are really, really hard. You got to have clarity of vision. You got to build consensus. Sometimes we have these things in schools called teams, right? Well, does every team in a school have a purpose? Because if you don't have a purpose, you're really not a team. So I'm on a team, but we don't have a purpose. What's our purpose? Well, to meet every week. Well, that's no purpose, right? So sometimes, there's a lot of back work that has to get done there. And when you're a teacher and you're a teacher leader, we know how much energy, the giving to students and how much attention how many decisions you are making on a daily basis. It's exhausting. There's a lot of energy out. So, if whatever you're doing in a leadership role is not bringing energy back in, and that's where I think if you're passionate about it and you believe it, you gravitate to that, follow the energy. If we've learned another thing in the pandemic, it's follow the energy and go ahead and do it. And
That's
then,
so true.
there's so much to learn.
Yeah. And you're so right about the energy, because I think often where people feel depleted because of just the situation is, where can you get that energy? Who are the people that would kind of reinvigorate you and really want you to get going? I've heard the quote that a leader is somebody that jumps and takes the grenade. And I'm wondering what you say to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. The leader's the one that, I'd say that, somebody that jumps on a grenade for the group, that's an incredibly courageous thing to do. And I would have to say, depending upon the circumstances, that would be an active leadership. I think, so sometimes if I can extend the metaphor, I think sometimes as leaders, we are the only ones to do something. There might be nobody else to do something that is utterly essential. And we are, part of our role, we are protectors. We're protectors of the people who are here now, and we're also the protectors of our future community. We like our boards of directors, who are very much great boards, think of themselves as the boards for the future. Right? We want to be here tomorrow for those kids that we don't even know yet. And I think heads also have to be in that space. So, if the grenade is there and that's what you have to do to protect the here and now and the future, then that's what you do. And that's a courageous act of leadership.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Question, John. It's a question. I like it. Yeah.
You often hear that, and more in the context. If you look at some of the pundits, like the Simon Sinek's and old Drew Dudley's, they talk about the Marines, that that kind of where I will do anything to save my platoon. And there's a watered down version with leaders that you see some leaders that, I remember having a leader every morning. They were at school at 6 o'clock and they were the last one to leave. He was actually a leader with you and me. And during the day, he was with kids. But in the morning, he came early and he stayed late because he knew that kind of work could not go during the day, because the day was focused on the teachers and the students. And that has never gotten out of my head. I am to this day so grateful to have witnessed that. And I think you have too. We both had the privilege of being with that leader. But I'm just, so it's often interesting. Another thing, and we have a guest, Dr. Helen Kelly, who's coming back. Where Dan and I had the pleasure of talking to her. She's done a lot of research about wellness and leaders and teachers, and she's about to write a book about well-being amongst school leaders, and we're going to have her back at the end of next month. Are you, from your cohort, as you talk to other leaders in your region and you're interacting with different organizations, and I know there's a HeadNet email group, are school leaders getting tired? Is this last 3 years really taking a toll? And are you seeing leaders saying, you know what, I'm done?
Yes. I mean, I don't know. I don't see how anyone's kind of coming through this and not feeling, not feeling the fatigue, the cumulative stress, the uncertainty, the waves of it, the burdens that brings along with it. So whether you're a school leader or, others, I think we're all going through this, and this is part of, the great reassessment that I think has been going on across many, many fields. Leadership, schools, we're community organizations, and communities have been really hard hit by this. So it's changed the job, made it very hard, there's been a lot of stress. So I think there's a lot of tension in the system. And that said, it's also, I'm going to look back on this and say, it's been an amazing experience. And I'm not talking about in the past tense, it's not going away. But certainly, I feel like it has, for me, and I'm basically an optimistic person. I thrive on taking a lot of responsibility and trying to do my job well. But this experience has really forced in me to do a much different kind of personal work on a continuous basis, and how I've had to rethink what does it mean, for us to take some responsibility, and what does optimism mean? There have been times where I've just felt like, I'm trying to be optimistic. Am I being real and genuine? And what does it mean for me to be the optimistic person that I am in this context when I don't have any clearer view on the crystal ball than anyone else? And then where in a time that requires strength, what does the new humility look like? Again, it's this situation it's exhausting because it's made our missions and what we do very, very real. This is not a simulation. And when you have that experience, I can jump on a grenade in my computer game, or I can jump on a grenade. And when you have the experience in reality, and you allow yourself that, there's just going to be a tremendous amount of growth. And so I think I hope that's what's happening for lots of us. There's a tremendous amount of risk and vulnerability there. I don't mean to downplay that. I know that from experience. I'm living with a lot of risk and vulnerability in my role and in the work that I'm doing. Okay, that is what it is. But the learning that this has given to us is truly, I think at some point we'll have enough distance to look back on it and say, what an amazing gift of experience this has been.
And I love that, the idea of looking back later and realizing what a gift it is, because sometimes now it doesn't feel like a gift. But I really like the way you're making us remind ourselves that usually in hindsight, then those positives really stick out and the learnings that we've engaged with. And this vulnerability, I think, is so important. And I'm sure, Dan can talk to this too. You hear about the great resignation, people basically saying, I'm done. And I think very likely collectively, we've never had to really self-reflect and think of ourselves, as you say so nicely, Andrew, being a stakeholder of ourselves. And maybe the one silver lining of COVID is finally we've really been able to dig deep and really reflect on what are we doing? Does this really matter? Do I really want to be doing this? And those vulnerabilities maybe provide us with a better framework to move forward. So definitely. Absolutely. I don't know, Dan, any thoughts or regarding?
No, I completely agree with everything you said. I mean, it's just been, like you say, I mean, I think we're going to look back on this and say there's been some really useful things, how we have grown in some ways. It doesn't always seem like that. I think on a concrete level, I mean, the COVID, for me, there's been a few things like that have really come positive. Like, for example, now I've completely given up watching the news. Like, I realized that it was absolutely destroying my mental health. And my life could go on as normal. I don't need to know the COVID statistics. It doesn't affect me directly. And it lives a diet of fear. So there's a few things, like I think concrete things, in terms of what you can grow from this. Like, I don't watch the news anymore at all. I don't even check the BBC website. I get it from different sources, and my life is absolutely better for it. It's interesting.
And I think, if you just look at Facebook in the stock market, more and more people are saying goodbye to social media because
I'm off Facebook as well. I'm not even on Facebook anymore.
Adam Grant, the podcaster, has a great thing. And he says, once you're on Instagram or any of these social feeds, you suddenly realize, what's the point? What is the value added? What have I gotten out of this? Absolutely nothing. I'm actually more miserable.
That's exactly Andrew, right. I was actually feeling more miserable on Facebook by the time I left. So, like, what's the point?
Yeah. So if you're holding stock in those things, go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I'm struck by. I think the pandemic has really shown, spotlighted what I think of. Before this virus got a hold of the world, I think there were debilitating behavioral viruses out there, self-pity, nostalgia, certainty. And this virus has really forced us to react into those behavioral viruses. Like, boy, if you're prone to self-pity through this, it is going to be it's been a grim time.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that? You own it. What's in my control? Start to own the things in your universe and take responsibility. It's been such a great reminder. And that's where, we spend so much time looking forward to getting back our old lives. Well, not going to happen. We're never going to go back. And so that's the source of optimism that we need to embrace. Optimism is not just pie in the skyism. It's a notion that we can look ahead and start to see new forms, right? And certainty is such a menace. John, you remember, I kept a sign in my classroom for years, which is certainty is the enemy of learning. And kids loved that, right? It's like, aren't we supposed to become sure about stuff? And I'm like, yeah, but, actually scientists are never sure. And it's like, this has been such a reminder to like, get humble, right?
Yeah.
We don't know a lot and it's okay. And so, yeah, and turning off the noise that's out there that's just basically sort of scratching at all these behavioral impulses that we have is, I think it's been crucial for a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think it was in The Economist, they say, welcome to predictable unpredictability. And
Yeah.
I think, that really stays there. Andrew, thank you. And I know you are closing a chapter and opening a new chapter. And I assume that you're looking forward to something different. Is this something that you feel that going into a different road is where you were at the end of your tenure here?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is first of all, I am optimistic about the next generation of leaders that are coming up in international schools. I'm seeing so much promise and energy, and that thrills me. I think, yeah, the intensity for me, just wanting to be like, I need to try something different. It's like if I don't, I'm not gonna. Actually, I couldn't do another head of school job right now because I don't have enough perspective on what has happened to me. Like I know that if I were going to do a head of school job again, which I could do, I may do, I am going to need more perspective. And so I've got to find a way to take that perspective. So I am going to change gears. I'm going to go back to the States. John, it's like, I know the biggest cultural shocks of my life are in my next year of going from where I've been. Every place is boring when you've lived in India for as long as I have. And I'm going to have to wrestle with that. I've been in the States enough to know that, okay, I'm going to have to go back, be a cultural agent again. I'm going to have more internal work to do. But in any case, I know that I need perspective. So if I were going to do this job again, and I haven't ruled it out, I love the job. I've loved it. I've loved the experience that I've had at this school and in Bombay. I know that if I gotta take myself to the other side and learn and think about things a little bit more.
Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely.
And what a wonderful way to leave, and also maybe remind everybody we all need to take perspective, and sometimes respite or doing something completely different is a good way to look back more than keep going, or as you said, not taking another head of school position right now, but doing something completely different. Andrew, thank you so much for your wisdom and your reflections in this podcast. And we wish you all the best, Kay, your wife, too, as you transition back to the United States. How long has it been since you guys lived there? I'm thinking is when we were in Japan, we left.
94.
Wow.
That's a long time. It's a different place.
I'm gonna be uncomfortable next year.
Yeah, that's right.
Dan, any
Hey,
other
it's
further?
been such a pleasure and an honor to engage in conversation with the two of you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Dan, any closing thoughts or anything?
No,
before
nothing.
we
I think
sign off?
Andrew finished it really well. It's been a real pleasure to talk, Andrew, and hope to talk again.